Women of Reddit. What things do men do that frighten you without them even realizing it? A guy I'm seeing took me out to a baseball game for our first date. It was nice. I didn't get any weird vibes from him at all. After the game, he asked if I wanted to go see some of the spots he likes to go walking. I didn't think much about it until we got there, and I realized he was basically taking me to the woods in the dark. He told me to follow him, and I'm thinking I'm about to get killed, but it turns out he just wanted to show me his favorite place to go on walks and chill, because you can see the entire city from there, and at night it does look really pretty. He took me to a couple more trails that night, and I ended up having a great time. I forgot that it's pitch black outside, and I'm with a guy I've never gone out with before out in nature. Definitely thought I was going to get killed at first, though. Story 2. Wanting to take me somewhere isolated to be just the two of us on the first date. It's okay if we've been hanging out for a while, but not if it's the first time I see you in person. Whenever this happens, I come up with an excuse not to go. I just don't feel safe since I barely know the other person. But the worst part is when they try so hard to convince me to go with them. This makes me feel more and more uncomfortable. Edit. Okay, I've read some of your comments and I think I have to clarify some things. What I intended was that I make up an excuse not to go to that specific isolated place, which means that I actually go to dates and propose to go to a public place instead. I've never ghosted anyone, and I try to tell the truth and make the other person understand that I just didn't feel comfortable. Something I've been told many times is, what do you mean by I don't feel comfortable? Do you think I'm a crazy psychopath who essays or kills people? Come on, don't say nonsense. Let's go get in the car. I mean, is this supposed to make me feel safe? By the way they react, it seems like I'm offending them, which is clearly not my intention. That's why I started making up excuses, because they stop insisting only when they know that something bigger is preventing me from going. I'm fully aware of the fact that not everyone has bad intentions, but it's not something I can understand immediately the first time I hang out with someone. Besides, I don't blame those who are simply clueless. My comment was just sharing a personal experience, not a general attack on men. And you can tell by the fact that I used they and the other person instead of he. Both men and women can experience this kind of thing, and I welcome everyone's story. For those who commented using not very kind words, please stop trying to make me look like I'm just a paranoid woman who can't tell the truth. And thanks to those who shared their experiences and opinions under what is one of my first comments here on Reddit. I really appreciated all these interactions. Stay safe, y'all. Story 3. I just had a crazy realization. About 4 years ago, I was at a bar with a bunch of friends. Everyone there was really close, with the exception of a woman who was new to our friend group. I worked at the bar, and so I had a really good relationship with the staff. I went to the bar and ordered 6 pints and brought them on a tray from the bar to our table myself. The new girl asked me to taste her beer for her and tell her what it tasted like. We were all fairly tipsy and I didn't think anything of it. It's fairly common at a bar to give out taster pours and all that. I took a sip without hesitation, and she just nodded and said thank you and grabbed it before I explained what it tasted like. I was a little confused and have been wondering what it was all about until now. Edit. Another user has pointed out the inefficacy of the tactic of the woman in my post. I feel that it is important to say here that I agree. This is not a foolproof way of determining whether your drink has been spiked. An experienced or smart predator will have a tolerance built up for the drug or have an antidote on hand. I need to stress that this is not a foolproof tactic. Best idea is to have full accountability of the drink from the bartender's hand to yours, and to maintain 100% accountability of that glass at all times. Do not break the chain of custody. When the bartender hands it to you, you keep an eye on it. If you ever leave it, it's over. Even to a friend, don't risk it. Edit. My fellow bartenders, do your due diligence and prevent this kind of effing barbarity from happening under your care. If someone orders multiple drinks, those drinks go to separate humans. This is actually built into law in a lot of states, so effing look it up and prevent date SA. If it's not a law in your area, bring it up at a community council meeting and make it a law, and help your place of employment become an arbiter of safe practice for women. Even if it's not a law, and you can't be effed showing up to talk to a bunch of sniveling politicians, at the very least, bring it up to your manager and request training for date SA prevention. Story 4. 3 years ago, I matched with a guy on Tinder and agreed to meet up with him. He suggested going to a park, and when I got there, it was a heavily wooded area with a trail, and I stupidly followed him into the trail. We walked around for a while, sat on some rocks, then it started getting dark, and we decided to head out. but we ended up getting lost and not being able to find the exit, and we stumbled upon a grave-sized hole in the dirt, and at this point it was pitch black, and I was thinking it was all set up and that I was going to be ambushed. I pointed out the grave-sized hole and he seemed scared too, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt and stayed quiet. We finally found an exit after about an hour of stumbling in pitch black darkness. We're still dating to this day, and I've brought up what a horrible date plan that was and how it came off the wrong way. He said he didn't realize it at the time. It was a total curb your enthusiasm moment. I was picked up that day, so I didn't have a car with me to back out and drive home, so that was pretty dumb of me too. Yeah, dude, that would scare me. If I went on a date with a girl and we went out to the woods and I found a freaking plot of land ready for me to be buried, there would have been no benefit of the doubt. I'm a hightailing it. Story 5. This one may be intentional, but it gives me the absolute creeps when men try to squeeze past and lightly put their hands on me, especially my waist. I hate it. Just say, excuse me. Edit. Quite a few people have asked clarifying questions, so I'll give my thoughts on when it's okay to touch a woman in a crowded area. 1. Try to just go around her another way. 2. If you can't, say excuse me. 3. If it's loud or something and that doesn't work, sometimes touching just can't be helped. Either just squeeze past if it's a packed area, or if you have to lay your hands on her, a firm but not rough hand on the shoulder or upper back is likely fine. Lightly tickling the lower back or the small of her waist is creepy. Usually if you touch a strange man that way, you might be up for a butt beating. If you wouldn't willingly touch some big strange guy that way, mostly looking at you straight guys, don't do it to a woman. I don't know if I've ever been somewhere so packed that I would even think to do something like that. Man, I need to get out more. But yeah, regardless, that's weird. Story 6. Guy who I sometimes see at work has at least 20 years on me. Effing pulled my ponytail to say hi one time. So shocked that I just smiled awkwardly and didn't say anything. Like, what world are you living that you think that's okay? Edit. This got kinda big. Some more details. I was able to talk to him later that day about how that wasn't acceptable and to not do anything like it in the future. He actually took it pretty well and has been fine to work with since. In this case, since there was no escalation, I know my boss and other coworkers have my back. I didn't feel the need to do anything further. While some people have good intentions and don't know their behavior is out of line, those actions still cause hurt. Personally, as long as the person is able to acknowledge that hurt and do better moving forward, I'm good with them. Malicious predators are a different story. It can be hard to tell the difference in some situations. Y'all, be careful out there. Story 7. Not understanding that a polite decline isn't an invitation just to try harder, and is just that, declining to spend more time with the guy. I know men complain all the time about how women must be communicating in some bizarre code that can't be expected to understand, but a lot of women have been conditioned by experience to decline a man's invitations or attentions in the most polite, face-saving way possible. I don't think there is a woman out there who hasn't had a man get really angry and threatening when they, the woman, was just trying to say thanks but no thanks and move on. I'm not just talking about getting picked up in a bar or on the street. I'm talking about any man anywhere who decides he wants a woman's full attention or wants to give his opinion on her appearance, attitude, lack of smiling, whatever at that moment. It happens so often that you just want to get away from this guy, but they aren't really noticing your, to you, obvious expressions of wanting to leave. And if you get more explicit, you really don't know what will happen. If you stay, you also don't know what will happen, because they might think you are leading him on. It feels like a no-win situation, and one a man could use as an excuse either way to verbally or physically attack you. Story 8. Guy here. Never realized that working alone with no one else in the store, night or day, can potentially be terrifying. I've opened and closed where I was the only employee in the building, and not once have I ever felt in any immediate danger. Some folks I suspected being a bit shady, but they never gave me any trouble. Not once did I ever think I could be at any significant risk. As a guy, it's just not a thought that ever comes to your mind. I worked for a local business whose owner, 25 years ago, had a man run into his store at around 10 a.m. frantically telling him to call the police. Turns out the poor guy went into the adult video store next door and discovered the young female clerk stabbed and laying lifeless in a pool of blood on the floor. Details emerged that she was stalked by someone who went to school with her, and one day he got fed up with being told no, and not long after that returned with a knife and killed her. She was lying dead on the floor for at least a half an hour before she was discovered. And since adult stores have their windows blocked and doors blocked so no one can see inside, The only way someone could see what happened is if there was an actual customer who intentionally went inside. Since it was a weekday morning, the store wasn't busy at all. The case was solved a couple of years ago, after being a nearly 25-year-old cold case and easily the most high-profile unsolved homicide in our city's history. And I was on shift the day the local news and cameras came into my workplace and wanted to speak with my boss. I later learned my boss was the very first person who made the call to 911. He was in the cooler, putting an order away, and didn't hear the murder take place. My former boss came to Canada from the Middle East about 50 years ago, so he's seen some crap over there. And he still ranks this murder as the saddest and most traumatic thing he's ever personally dealt with. From that day on, he never let any staff member work by themselves to close the store again. Story 9. Invading my space. I used a massage chair a few weeks ago at the gym, and it's one of the newer models that will lift you and bring you to a reclined position about 3 feet off the ground. I'm 5'1", so for some that may not seem too high, but for me it's pretty elevated. There was this man who walked into the room, kept looking at me, and tapped me to ask my name and tell me I was pretty. I had headphones in, my eyes were shut, and I clearly was not wanting to engage with anyone. Flashed him my engagement ring. My fiance wasn't at the gym at the time, and told him my fiance was coming to join me. Never saw a man book it so hard. It's so frustrating that no matter how clear you are trying to make the fact that you are a woman who is not interested in talking to people, it's not respected, until you insinuate a more masculine partner is present. May have been intentional there, but I feel like a lot of times invasion of space can be unintentional. Story 10. When they taught me about not wanting to have a conversation with them, a stranger. A recent example that I want to vent about. Last week, my friend and I were smoking outside the bar she works at, and she thought she recognized her male friend. She quickly realized it wasn't him, but it was too late, and the stranger came to us and crouched to be at our level. We were sitting on a step, and simply would not take our explanation that we mistakenly thought he was someone else for an answer. Edit, we had already said and signaled to him that it was a mistake, so when he inserted himself in our bubble, I was like, alright, there he effing goes. For way too long he stayed there, and purposefully ignored what we were saying and pretended to not understand. For example, he went, "It was a mistake? What do you mean? I don't think anything in my life is a mistake." Blah, blah, blah. He would turn anything we said into a question. It was infuriating. I tried stating politely that it was a mistake. We apologized and he could go. I tried shutting him down and saying straight up, "Can you please just go?" But he just would not budge. Anyone would have known by our facial expressions and tone of voice that we were not enjoying him being there at all, and were seriously wanting him to leave. I ended up just grabbing my friend, and we got up and quickly walked back to the bar a few doors down. As we were walking, I heard him say, "What? Are you scared?" This stuff happens to me too often. These men get off on making you uncomfortable or knowing they're ruining your fun. I have to get better at ignoring them, but it's so difficult. They don't mind standing 1 foot away from me, talking to me while being ignored. That's easy. But I just want to scream and tell them to F off. I'm scared of them. A minute of it feels like 10, and I'm scared they could just get angry and take my silence for a green flag. The thoughts that go through my head are incredibly violent whenever this happens. I absolutely despise men who do this. I am an adult human just like you. I deserve the same respect. I deserve not to get bullied by strangers on the street who have never seen me and will never see me again. Sorry for the rant. Edit. The only funny thing about this whole interaction is that my friend and I are fluent in English and French. So after we explained politely and asked him to leave, etc., and he wouldn't budge, I started having a conversation with my friend in French and telling him to F off and insulting him with a deadpan expression. Admittedly, that wasn't going to accomplish anything, and it's an a-hole move, but it felt good. Kind of like reversing the table. Ha! Who's talking to a wall now, Story 11. When a man asked to come inside my place after a date when it wasn't planned in advance during the early stages of dating, still getting to know them. Personally, this has happened to me a handful of times. Sometimes the men who do this will insist on picking me up, which, yes, a gentleman will pick up their date from their place. Truly appreciated. When they drop me off afterwards and walk me to my door, which again, it's a kind gesture, but then they invite themselves in. I feel trapped. I will invite you over when I'm comfortable. If they have the courage to invite themselves into my home early on and spontaneously, what other boundaries of mine will they push? It frightens me. Story 12. When I was at my thinnest, UK 6, A lot of men I might chat, flirt, go on dates with would talk about how they liked how small I was, and they'd love to get their hands on me because they could imagine how light and limber I would be, that they could lift me up, make shapes with my body, throw me around, have lots of fun, essentially, to use my tiny body for their own gratification. They would often laugh and joke around in this manner, like I should be so flattered, because all every woman wants is a big, strong man to take hold of them and just do whatever the F they want. Show us how it's done, right? No. Disgusting, disturbing, and often quite scary. Many men just want to abuse a woman like a doll and expect to be thanked for it. Story 13. I'm of the male variety. I drive Uber a lot, sometimes up to 12 hours a day. I treat everyone with respect and will greet them when they enter and confirm their destination. Usually I'm quiet because I'm more introverted and just let the radio play. I started to notice girls would enter their address in their own GPS on their phones. One time it started speaking turn-by-turn directions until she quickly fumbled and turned it off. I didn't think much of it, but when one time a woman got in the car and she was wearing a sweatshirt from a local festival, we started talking about the festival and how our families go every year. When we got to her drop-off, she thanked me for talking to her because she said she's usually so anxious in Ubers with male drivers. I honestly had never considered that before, so now I always try to start neutral conversations with women in the car, even if I'm tired. Story 14. I was late getting my driver's license and hired a professional driving instructor to help me learn to drive. He was a guy about my age and he was openly hitting on me. It was so uncomfortable. It was just in the car and I was just such a vulnerable person as a novice driver depending on him for support. I didn't want him to think I was interested, but I was also terrified to be rude to him because he was in control. It was a terrible experience and actually set me back several more years from driver training. Just need to add as well, since there are presumably men here reading to learn what not to do, learn how to notice hesitation. You'll never understand the intense pressure to be nice, polite, and even feign some form of interest as a method of self-preservation. It is a survival tactic, and it works. Just about all of us have gotten out of a volatile situation this way. If a woman is avoiding eye contact, seems to hesitate to answer, especially personal questions, or is agreeing with you a lot without attempting to carry the conversation, she is hoping you will leave her alone. Interested women make eye contact, share willingly, and try to joke around or otherwise show their personality. If you are not sure, tell her you're going to another location in whatever establishment you are in. I'm going to grab a drink or go outside for a smoke or go back to my table, and invite her to join you. If she comes along, green light. If she takes the out and makes an excuse to leave, you have your answer. Story 15. Hanging out aimlessly in my peripheral vision. Husband will not take this seriously. I may need to cut off his legs just to make him stop. Edit. But really it's effed up that I have to add this, and this is a big part of the reason why women get spooked by things that men do without men being aware of it. It doesn't matter if it's rational to you or not. The question was what scares you? So my answer was what scares me. There is no call here for a bunch of guys to come mansplain how wrong and or crazy I am. It's a thing that I don't like, just like leaving the toilet seat up, and it's not unreasonable that I ask someone who shares my space to not do that thing. I avoid doing things that he doesn't like leaving makeup everywhere and waking him up with a rubber alien mask on. It's part of being in a relationship. Some people are afraid of garden snakes. Some people are creeped out by clowns. I am unnerved by someone standing half behind me and just hovering there for a while for no discernible reason. Oh my gosh, some of these people need to get a grip. Immediate disregard for women's thoughts and feelings when literally nobody effing asked you is how you get to be considered a creepy man and how women become afraid of you. To the men who did not do this, thank you. And I hope you enjoy your fulfilling relationships that result from basic decency on the part of all parties. Feel free to educate your, I assume, 12-year-old sons who feel the need to jump in and be twats about it. Story 16. Casually commenting on my body. If I have cleavage showing, it might be because it's 90 degrees outside. It isn't for you to assess and comment because I'm not trying to attract attention. I'm trying to get a little relief. I recently had a conversation with someone who said he didn't think of it as rude. He considered saying, "I like your," as a compliment and that all compliments are created equal. Casually touching my hip or waist if we aren't dating. Blocking my workspace exit. Talk or yelling at me, maybe that is harassment. Randomly approaching and asking a bunch of questions. Getting verbally abusive after I say no. You may not think you're being abusive, but it's scary when a calm man suddenly starts raging and calling you all sorts of names and telling you how worthless you are. Turning on a dime like that makes me wonder if you've got stability issues that make you an immediate threat. Now, I have to run regardless of what I'm wearing or carrying. Story 17. Any man approaching me in a covered car park. Years ago, I was working a charity event in Las Vegas and walking back to my car in an evening gown and high heels whilst carrying the bank drop and a few other things. A few colleagues were behind me in another elevator. I clicked to open my car doors, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a security guard approaching. I didn't think much of it. He started walking much faster, and I quickly thought to call my colleague on my cell. I didn't have it up to my mouth, but I was yelling quite loudly for him to get away, as now he was trying to pin me to my car as I fought back. Quickly, my colleagues, including several men, came running and called him off and tussled a bit. We did report it to the head of security and the police, but there are no cameras in the car park. I'm quite certain my friend saved me from being further attacked by this troglodyte. That was 20 years ago, and I signed up for my first Krav Maga classes the following week. I still train, and my situational awareness is greater than it was 20 years ago, but I will never forget the abject fear in the pit of my stomach when I realized that this mother effer was going to attack me. Fight or flight really does kick in. Story 18. Go in for physical touch when we don't know each other that well. You are probably bigger than me. A hug doesn't always look like a hug when a big strange dude is forcing it on you because he assumes it looks or feels friendly to me. Similarly, watch my body language and listen to me. If I'm tensing up or I'm monosyllabic, I'm not comfortable. I've been stalked in broad daylight before. Heck, I was followed around an empty of people rural scenic area by a strange man a few days ago. Luckily, 2 passing cyclists chased him off when they saw him whistling at me like a dog and acting strangely. It's not that I automatically assume you, as a man, are a bad person. Some of my closest, lifelong friends are men. It's that I've had extremely scary and sometimes physical experiences with men in broad daylight, touched on the bus, physically picked up at the beach by a stranger, tailed home from Target by a man who wanted my number. It's those things that keep me on high alert. Just don't assume your attention is welcome. Pay attention to my very clear verbal and nonverbal cues, and we'll probably be besties. Story 19. Flirting with me or pushing my boundaries when I'm working. I used to work as a barista, and some of the men who came in were just awful about it. They'd call us sweetheart or ask personal questions that were way out of line, like, "Where do you live?" or "Do you close alone?" It sucks because when you're in customer service, there's even more pressure to be pleasant and accommodating for customers, so it's hard to enforce boundaries without being told off by the boss. The worst was a guy who came in every Sunday. He tried to come behind our counter multiple times and talked about all his, sometimes gross, personal problems. Once, when I was opening the shop alone, he came in even though the open light wasn't on. I was in the back chopping fruit, and he appeared at the door of the kitchen. I don't know what would have happened if I wasn't holding a big knife at the time, but it seemed to shock him and he backed off from where he was. Story 20. I was getting my air conditioner fixed in my apartment by these 2 repairmen. They seemed pretty nice. We were chatting. I was kind of watching them do their thing and asking a few questions because I'd never seen someone fix one and was just curious about the process. They pack up and head out. My AC is fixed. Everything seems fine. About an hour and a half later, there's a knock on my door. One of the repairmen is back and says he forgot his water bottle. Can he come in and get it? And I'm a little nervous since I didn't see his friend anywhere, but I ask him what it looks like and I can go get it for him. He points it out behind me and kind of steps around me back into my apartment to grab it. And now I'm scared. Dude did not ask, just came right back in. He ended up shooting his shot and trying to give me his number. I said I wasn't looking for anything. He sort of jokingly said, "You never know, I could be the one." I said I had a boyfriend. I didn't, but he didn't seem to be taking no for an answer. He gave me his card anyway and grabbed one of my pens to circle his cell number on it, and then he left. I'd never thought about anything like that happening before. This stranger now knows my address and the layout of my apartment. I'm glad he was just a nice but awkward guy and he didn't pick up on my social cues rather than a psycho or something, but that was terrifying. Story 21. As a black man, I am seeing a lot of posts about completely normal and innocent actions that are seen as inherently intimidating when done by men. That would be seen as racist if it were seen as intimidating from black people. I'm going to get a lot of hate and downvotes for this due to the double standard, but just a reminder that the US sentencing disparity by sex is 6 times wider than by race, 63% versus 9%, and this socially acceptable fear of men for being born male has its unfair consequences. This is why men, even fathers, struggle to be allowed around children without immediate suspicion or discrimination. It's why men are much more likely to be convicted or get the death penalty for the same crime as a woman. We see them as inherently dangerous and even inherently guilty, in a way that would never be allowed for other groups, such as black people, who have a similarly high violent crime rate. I get that it's socially acceptable to assume the worst of men because they're men, but it is a form of discrimination. that I, as a black man, can be seen as dangerous because of how I was born. While you may defend against such discrimination because I'm black, you would encourage that same discrimination because I am male. Please don't make your insecurities your problem. Judge people on their actions, not how they were born. Alright, I've said my unpopular truth, bring on the hate. Well, that's an interesting conversation, and one that would be nice in theory. However, and I can't speak to racism, but as a man, I would say, I think there's a line between discrimination and openly hating versus being like, there is a noticeable size difference here, and I'm just going to be a little bit more alert or a little bit more on my toes here. Not just going, hey, all men are bad, all men suck, all men are evil. Instead going, I'm going to be cautious, And it's rooted in fear for your own safety. Who am I to tell you how to be scared, right? I think as long as you're not being hateful, it's fine to do whatever you feel you gotta do to be safe, Again, not hateful, but cautious. Story 22. I'm a guy and I'm guilty of scaring my wife on our first date. I met my wife for the first time outside a pizza parlor near my hometown. I grew up in a small town with a population of like 10,000 or less. I thought it would be a good idea to take her to meet my wacky family after we had our dinner date. The thing is though, I live in a ranch-style home way out off the country highway road and off another country highway road. The interaction went fine that night and we've been together since. However, years later she told me, when you took me to meet your parents for the first time, I'd never seen so many cornfields in a row before or any houses without any neighbors. I really thought you were going to kill me. Honestly, I do still feel bad about it, even though it all worked out. I just ran out of date ideas in the moment. Take my advice, fellow men. Always ask if she is comfortable before making any kind of decisions. And even if they say they are, just be extra sure. Story 23. Several years back when I lived in an apartment complex, a neighbor took interest in me. He suggested I go over to his apartment and he'd cook me dinner at some point. No way was I going to his apartment before knowing him better, so I left it open as a future possibility, but wasn't really concerned at that point. It was odd for the first conversation, however. The name he told me was a clear nickname, which was fine. Not too concerned about that, a few conversations in, he claimed to be a major at my local university that the school didn't offer, criminology to boot. Okay, getting a little sketchy now. Then he started parking in front of my apartment instead of around the corner where his apartment was to catch me going in or out. I was on the third floor, so I could peek out the windows and see him just sitting in the car waiting, often for long periods. I was actually in the process of moving elsewhere in town at this point. He realized and asked where I was moving to. I just gave vague answers, then finally flat out lied when he kept pushing because I was starting to feel uncomfortable at this point. It culminated one evening when I was heading home, kinda late, and it was very dark out. The complex was gated, so only one way in or out. I drive in, and he was in his car, parked by the front office. He turned the car on as I passed and started to follow me towards the back corner where my apartment was. That was a big nobody moment for me. I bypassed my apartment, sped around two corners so he couldn't see me, and squeezed behind a convenient trailer. I shut my lights off and promptly called my dad because I was freaking out and wanted someone to calm me down and know what was going on. I watched him circle the complex twice more, park in front of the office again, and wait about 30 more minutes before he finally left. The last few days I lived there, I would park down from my apartment and sneak in or out only when his car wasn't around. I left without ever seeing him again. I'll never know what his intentions were. I'd like to think he just really liked me and was genuinely just trying to talk to me some more. Regardless, him parking and waiting for me, then following me, freaked me the heck out. Innocent intentions or not, I had no intention of finding out firsthand. Sometimes I feel bad about it and think he really just wanted to see me. And other times, I'm glad to be alive and feel convinced there were bad intentions at play. Story 24. When they don't know when to leave you alone. At this job, I've experienced some more encounters similar to this one, but this one was by far probably the worst. So I work at a pet store, so we often have customers coming in to adopt or look at pets. This customer wanted to ask how to adopt, so I explained it to him and then thought it was the end of that. Oh no, it wasn't. He asks what high school I went to and replied, I was homeschooled. Then he goes on to say, do I know you from somewhere? You just look familiar. What's your name? So I tell him my name, and I don't think we've ever met. Then he proceeds to ask if I go to a college in my town, which I reply no, and somehow we ended off the conversation, can't remember how. But I remember I was working, then he asks me to help him with cat food, so I start to explain to him what foods are good and what are bad. Then afterwards I go back to work, seems good? No. I notice as I'm stalking, he keeps walking by the aisle I'm at on both sides and looking my way, and my coworker realizes it as well. And we laugh, and we're like, okay, this is getting weird now. Then all of a sudden he calls me out by my name and asks for help. I go to follow him, and he needs help to find a carrier. Nothing else happened after this, and he eventually left. Maybe he was just clueless of how he was acting, but nonetheless, it made me uncomfortable. Story 25. I got a flat tire a few weeks ago. I have changed flats many times and am comfortable doing it by myself. Thankfully, the weather was decent and there was an empty parking lot for a building up for rent. Read, no one else was around. After some effort, I discovered the only way to get the lug nut off was with a pneumatic tool. My phone was about to die, so I texted my brother to meet me with a phone charger as I'd mistakenly left mine at home. Thankfully, he was there with me when this happened. A man in a large pickup truck pulled into the parking lot and completely blocked off the only entrance and exit point. There was no ostensible reason to do this. It was a large lot. He could have parked anywhere. He had an NRA sticker on his truck, signaling to me it's possible he could be armed and this implied force. He readily told me that he had been watching me from his home across the street, which was unbeknownst to me, and that he wanted to help me. After repeatedly telling him that I was fine and the tow truck was on its way, he finally got the hint and left. Possibly when he noticed my brother was now with me, he went back across the street and he stayed outside in his driveway for another 20 minutes or so, until the repairman arrived and fixed the tire. He may certainly have been well-meaning. However, his words and actions were viewed as threatening to me. Story 26. Rationalize, justify, explain, argue why a man's actions were actually okay when we recount stories of things men do that frighten us, creep us out, or make us uncomfortable. It tells me that you care more about defending another man than you do about me. My feelings are not up for debate, and I'm not obligated to consider his side. It happens all the time on Reddit. I distinctly remember a topic on this very sub asking women in the service industry how they feel about being asked out at work. Countless women answered with variations of creeped out, unsafe, trapped, please don't. These guys take advantage of the power imbalance because I have to be nice or risk losing my job. A professional customer service manner doesn't mean I like you. So many of these replies were downvoted and drew butthurt replies from men complaining, well, where else am I supposed to ask her out? I don't mean any harm. Women have no idea how hard it is to ask someone out. Actually, yes I do. Of both genders, I've done it myself. Not taking no for an answer. I really shouldn't have to explain this one. Seriously, it doesn't matter if it's regarding sex. I've experienced men repeatedly asking for my number even after I explicitly said no. I'm not Homer Simpson, taking you to Mount Splashmore because you pester enough. No means no. If I can't trust you with the smallest, simplest of things, how am I supposed to trust you with the big stuff? I've asked men to not call me pet names like dear before, only to be ignored. It's a simple request, easy enough to respect. It doesn't matter if other women are fine with it or if it's your habit. If I ask you to stop, then here's an opportunity for you to demonstrate respect in action. If you can't respect my wishes on little things, that tells me I can't trust you or feel safe around you. Throwing a tantrum at rejection. I'm not a fan of ghosting, but this is a reason many women who ghost do so. They don't want to end up on r/when women refuse. Unwanted, unsolicited, unnecessary physical contact, especially when I don't know you. If you want to get past, say, excuse me, but don't put your hand on my hip, lower back, or whatever. On one occasion, I was visiting a city and went into a church to look around and admire the stained glass. A man approached me and started talking about the peace of Christ. Okay, not unexpected in a church. He held out his hand for me to shake, as is the norm in Christian environments. I grew up in a Catholic family. Shaking hands with strangers every Sunday was normal for me, and so I took it. He held my hand with both of his and kissed it, even holding on when I tried to pull it away. I didn't make a fuss because I was young and lacked confidence, and I didn't want to shout in a church, which of course is exactly what he was counting on. Not all men. Telling women to stop acting like every man is an SAer. We know not all men, but too many men, and we can't tell in advance which ones. Then we get victim shamed or blamed if anything does happen to us. There's a great comic strip on risk versus consequences that I've shared on Reddit before, quite a while back. Story 27. Had a guy randomly approach me while I was wearing earbuds to ask what kind of music I was listening to while leaving the train platforms. I gave him a vague answer and continued on my way to the bus waiting area outside the train station. Minutes later, this dude appeared again and asked for my number. I told him, no, I don't give my number out to strangers. A-hole literally said, my name is blank. Now we're not strangers anymore. So what's your number? Yeah, it doesn't work like that, buddy. I told him no again, and he kept being pushy. I got some bus drivers involved who were having a smoke break, one of which was a lady, and told them the situation and how I was very uncomfortable and anxious. And the lady went off on the guy. Full on yelled at him what the F he was thinking, and he did not realize how creepy he was being. No means no, pal. The dude left with his tail between his legs, and the lady told me to hang with her and the other bus drivers until it was time for me to get on my bus, as the dude was hovering in the distance and still staring. Turns out the lady was the one who would drive the bus I had to take. I'll forever be grateful to her because the dude seriously creeped me out and gave me bad vibes. Story 28. I remember sitting down on a bench next to a woman at an otherwise empty train station one dark, frosty morning and having a chat with her. She seemed really nervous, but I figured it was just because I was a stranger and she wasn't great at talking to strangers. That was around 10 years ago, and despite my crappy memory, I still remember it clearly. I realized that it's not because she wasn't great at talking to strangers, it's because a man she didn't know invaded her personal space by talking to her in a dark train station with no one else around and didn't leave her alone, despite her obvious body language. Still makes me feel horrible that I made her feel uncomfortable and didn't recognize it at the time. The only saving grace is that nothing happened and I turned out to be nothing but a too friendly person that just wanted a chat. Nothing more. Still, never did anything like that again. Sorry, random lady. Story 29. As a guy, some of these answers are making me more than a tad uncomfortable, particularly the awkward guy ones. I, male 52, have ADHD and am on the autistic spectrum, and quite often manifest an utter inability to read social cues and body language. But I'm pretty good at realizing I'm just coming across as odd or said something weird or inappropriate almost exactly 10 seconds too late, then spending a lifetime of cringing and anxiety-driven overthinking about it at 3 a.m. I wholeheartedly apologize to all the women I've unintentionally and innocently creeped out over the years by being effing clueless. Even my daughter would, and has, described me as a well-meaning idiot with the social skills of roadkill. Harsh, but probably fair to be honest. Like the time we had a bonding team-building exercise at work where we were paired up with a random person from another office and had to say something unusual and interesting about ourselves to the other person, and my effing brain decided that talking about when I was a stark bollock naked on national TV and in the national tabloid press to the very shy 17-year-old female intern was an effing wonderful idea. I was once in a crowded bar talking to a woman I knew and really liked, but my desperate attempt at small talk to make some kind of connection with her was probably doomed when I opened my mouth and to my slightly delayed horror blurted, "Hey, we've got something in common. I've had amoebic dysentery too," followed by me just immediately getting up, awkwardly mumbling something, leaving her and her friends in the bar and avoiding all human contact for a week. That was 25 plus years ago, and it literally still makes me cringe at night. So yeah, not all weird, inappropriate guys are a threat to anyone. Some of us are just awkward idiots. But I totally get that a lot of guys are predatory as opposed to just dumb and awkward, and that women generally have to watch out for crappy and predatory behavior and signs, and to err on the side of caution. It just sucks that they have to do that just in case and to protect themselves. Story 30. I once dated a guy who got way too attached and started referring to me as his future wife on our second date. I corrected him quickly and told him I wasn't looking for a serious relationship with him. We were young, just a few years out of high school. But rather than take the hint, he doubled down and started naming our future children. I broke it off with him pretty quickly. His response to a gentle letdown was to propose to me, so I made it super clear that I didn't want to see it or talk to him again. I flatly refused to acknowledge his future attempts at contact, never responding to him despite the number of times he tried to reach out. Eventually, the call slowed and then stopped. Then, a few years down the road, I get a call at work one day. It's him, and he's calling to tell me he had moved across the country and had been saving up for a year so he could buy me a gift. It was a one-way ticket for me to fly to his new home, and he said he had an apartment and a whole new life waiting for me. I told him I buried someone already and hung up, silently hoping that he was, indeed, across the country and wouldn't be able to find me once I left that job. I was out within a few weeks and he never reached me again. I still don't use my real name online anywhere, just in case. Story 31. Leave me alone if I've already said I don't want to be friends. Years ago, I was at the grocery store getting produce supplies for work since we ran out. In line, a guy approached me, commenting that he's seen me in the area and wanted to be friends. I politely said, "No thanks. I'm actually working right now and can't talk." He offers to walk me down the street back to work, and being 19 or 20 at the time, I didn't want to make a big deal, so I let him. He repeatedly asked if we could be friends. I kept saying, "No, I have enough friends at the moment." He asked for my number, and again I felt weird or bad about being rude, so I gave it to him. He immediately calls it to make sure I didn't give him a fake number, walked me all the way back to work, and turned out that he worked next door. He would try and make conversation and come into my work when I was working alone. Generally harmless, but made me so uncomfortable to be alone at work which happened often, or to walk by his workplace. Story 32. The catcalling, especially if it's by a pack of animals when no one else is around. When I was still a teenager living at home, I used to go to the library all the time. About once every week or two. When I was about 17, the city decided to build a whole new library across the street from the current one, in what used to be the parking lot. So instead of only crossing the street, I had to park a block up and then walk over. No biggie, you'd think. Think again. The construction workers started terrorizing me with promises of obscene things they'd do to me if I'd just let them. Just awful stuff. Even when I brought my kid brother along, because at that distance, how would they know he wasn't a boyfriend? They still did it. Even when my brother grabbed my hand like a boyfriend would, they would still scream this awful stuff at me. I would go home in tears from how much they humiliated and scared me every single time. Then came the revenge. One of them was hurt on the job, and he was taken to the hospital where my mother worked. On a day when I had popped in to bring her lunch, she forgot. When I left and my mother turned to start taking his info to prep him for surgery, he asked how she knew me. That's my daughter. She's so beautiful. She must really like books too, huh? I see her going to the library all the time. This instantly freaked out my mother. How do you know that she goes to the library? Oh, I do construction work for the new library. That's how I got hurt. So you're her mom? Ever since the first time I saw your daughter, I thought she was so pretty. You think she'd go out with me? Wrong question. She'll never go out with you. I'll never let her. But why? Because every time she goes to the library, she comes back crying because you and your friends yell awful things at her that embarrass her and scare her. That's my little girl. She's a sweet, shy girl who loves books and music and kittens. She's not a piece of trash that you can treat like dirt, and I don't appreciate you doing that to her. You had no right to treat her with so much disrespect that she's now afraid to go to the library. She deserves better than that, and don't you ever forget it. For a long time, I had no idea why the catcall suddenly stopped. Instead, there was dead silence whenever I walked by, not even a hammer ping, and I could feel the eyes on me watching every step I took. That was sort of scary too, but I got used to it. This mom rocks. I mean, it shouldn't have had to even been said, but she crushed it. Story 33. From the comments, it sounds like the idea of trying to meet a woman out in public is almost completely dead. I'm a talkative guy and like meeting new people, regardless of age or gender. I'm typically more afraid to talk to the woman I find more beautiful just because I know they think I'm trying to hit on them. It's very annoying. Sometimes I just like talking with people in general. Beautiful people can be even more fun to talk to because they are more visually appealing in addition to the stimulation from the conversation. That goes for either gender for me. It's a lot easier for me to talk to an attractive man than an attractive woman because the men don't typically think you are hitting on them. I'm not even bi. I just like the stimulation from new information and conversations. If they are visually appealing to look at, then it's a plus. I think times have changed. My grandpa showed my grandma he liked her and was serious about her by insisting on walking her home from school. They have been together for over 50 years now. I don't think a lot of women would even give a guy that chance nowadays. Question is, does it depend on the level of attraction you feel for them? Like if a guy sat next to you and struck up a conversation, but he was very handsome, would you reject him just because he's showing interest in you over everyone else in the public area? Are dudes supposed to just never talk to the opposite gender in public? If they are or are not attracted to you? I was recently catching up with a friend. We weren't super close, but pretty well acquainted since elementary school. And since we grew up around each other, I asked if she was still living around where we grew up. I had moved away. It was a good conversation up to that point, but I immediately got ghosted after I asked that. Like, what happened? I was just trying to be nice and keep the convo going. If it was the guy on the other side of the text, I'm not sure I would have gotten ghosted. I hadn't even realized I did anything strange until I got completely ghosted out of seemingly nowhere. It felt very rude and was like I was being attacked by her, as if she was saying to me, "Hey, you are an effing stalker and you cannot be trusted," even though I had the purest of intentions. I'm in a very long-term relationship as well, literally just being nice. I guess being nice and making convo is a red flag nowadays too. Some women are on some other level nowadays, always in fight or flight mode around men. It's annoying and it makes us men feel like we did something wrong even if we have the best of intentions. Or we just like talking to people or beautiful people of any gender. That being said, not every woman is like this. I've had some great genuine conversations with women that did not make me feel like some stalker a-hole. Story 34. Insisting on walking me home. I don't know you and I don't want you to know where I live. This often happens when walking home alone in the evening. Someone from the street will tag along or they noticed me going out from a bar and followed me, trying to come in because as we walked home together, I actually want you to come up and have relations with me. I'm just playing hard to get. insisting you only want to chat once we get up, and if you wanted to essay me or kill me, you could do it right here and right now, which should totally calm me down, right? Finding out my name and connecting on social or asking for my number from an acquaintance. All my friends know now that I never want anyone to give my number out. Once a random guy I met at the bar figured out my last name, found out where I lived, and stalked me for weeks, threatening to kill me if I wouldn't go out with him. On the street, stopping me and asking me for my number and then immediately calling it to make sure I wasn't lying, make sure I wrote it correct, forcing me to give my real number. I lie to get you to stop following me or harassing me because I feel threatened and worried that if I refuse, you will get angry and essay or kill me. A fake number is intentional, you creep. Oh, and whenever someone says, don't need to worry about them as they are a gentleman, a good man, I am immediately concerned for my safety. Story 35. When guys or grown men start talking to you and or sitting beside you out of nowhere in an empty public transport. I live in northern Sweden where it's not normal to have a social conversation with strangers. I use the bus for transportation. I'm 15, by the way. So I was going to meet my friend in the inner city, so I took the bus. I had my headphones in while I chose a place to sit. I finally chose a place which was at the back of the bus with 4 seats facing each other. I sat down, and immediately after, this middle-aged looking guy sat down in front of me. I had my headphones in, and I was scrolling through TikTok like a normal teenager, and then he starts asking me stuff like, "Where are you from? How old are you?" I answered politely and declined the Snickers bar he had offered me. At this point, I was very visibly nervous, legs shaking, and he commented that he was a boxer. I thought to myself, oh crap, and was even more nervous. I tried to make as little conversation as possible so that he would get the hint. I also didn't take out my headphones or stop scrolling through TikTok. Finally, he got the hint and angrily told me off for not wanting to have a conversation with him, a 28-year-old man, and moved to another seat. I guess he was just trying to be nice, but I was still scared. Story 36. This is going to sound a bit strange, but I'll give context. When guys are over-complimentary to me, like giving compliments on things they really don't know about me, I had a narcissistic ex that love-bombed me when we first met and started talking, and me, being the naive and sheltered girl that I was, ate it up and loved it. After suffering for 3 months in a toxic relationship, I left, and then studied up on narcissism and the warning signs of that personality. So when I got back into the dating scene, any guy that started chatting me up and over-flattering me over dating apps without us having met yet immediately brought up red flags. Don't get me wrong, compliments are nice and they have a good way to start a conversation. That shirt makes your eyes pop, or those are really cool shoes. But when it gets over the top, it can be really uncomfortable. Luckily, I don't have to worry about that anymore as I've been happily married for a couple years. But guys, please take this comment section into consideration. Story 37. I know probably hundreds of people have said it already, but personal space. If I don't know you, I don't want you within at least a foot or 2 feet from me. And don't touch women you don't know. Once when I was working my old retail job during COVID, I had an old man come from behind me and stand right beside me while I was standing by the checkout counter. He was way too close to me even if we weren't in a pandemic. I immediately went to step back as I can't stand people in my personal space and stepped on a broken circle chair. The old man swooped in and grabbed me around the lower waist, got super close to my face, and told me to be careful where I was walking so I didn't trip. I was not tripping or falling. Literally all I did was take a step onto the chair thing and look backwards because I realized I stepped on something. I was incredibly uncomfortable as I was probably a quarter of this man's age and he had made a point to go for my lower waist. If someone is actually falling and you want to help them from falling, I'd go for the arm or the shoulder. Story 38. So my parents are divorced, so on the weekends we go see my dad, and weekdays we stay at my mom's. While we were at my dad's, my sisters, ages 12 and 9, were sitting on the church railing because me and my brother were pretending like we were spies. A few minutes go by and I notice something move in the trees across from them, and I look over there and it's an old man, probably in his 40s, just dead on staring at them. So I go into protective mug sis mode, and I take the safe option, and I tell my brother what I say, and he starts to flip, and I tell him to stay calm and just follow me. And we get over there, and I'm like, girls, come on, we need to leave. And they're like, what? Why? And I said, I'll tell you in a minute. And I look over there, and the guy looks like he had just seen a murder, and he looks like he's going to kill me, and I just grab them and run. When we get to a hiding spot, I tell them everything, and they had no idea. And then we hear a loud engine go off, and I pick up my sister because I was dragging them behind me, and my sister stepped on a sharp stick, and I ran. When I turn back, I see a man on a dirt bike frantically searching, and I've never ran that fast in my life. When we get back with my dad, he was all confused, like, why did you come from that way? Why didn't you just come back from the cornfield like you normally do? And I didn't tell him anything. I just said that under my cousin's car wall, next to my cousin's car, we just see two men on a dirt bike riding down our street, coming from the field, and then we rushed inside, and they were like, oh my gosh. And we just told them the whole thing. I don't know if this was like a setup or if we were actually going to get hurt, but the thing that men do that scares me the most is watch little girls when they were very vulnerable, like my sister was in a dress with no shoes, and my other sister had shorts on and no shoes, and then they're short, young, and skinny, and not very strong like me. So that was the most terrifying thing that's ever happened in my life, and I don't worry, guys, they're still okay, they're still alive, they're still okay. Story 39. Not a woman, but when anyone asks for phone numbers, insists on going with them somewhere private, verbally assaulting you for saying no, and making jokes that are obviously not jokes to any sane person with any sort of compassion or humanity. I've been stalked by guys that thought they liked or loved me. It's effing scary. Take no for an answer. Read the room. See the hints. He or she's just not that into you. When old fat, ugly guys that could be your father or grandfather hit on you because you're freshly legal and you know dang sure they'd be openly hitting on you when you were 14 if it were legal. And some of them hit on you when you were a minor anyways and never the way you were warned about. It's always with niceness and pleasantries, which is worse, when they're your actual family too. Which, by the way, why the F does family think they can just touch you whenever they want, regardless of consent, and they can't take no for an answer? They also don't give an F about boundaries and privacy, as well as they're often our first bullies and offenders. My father is a predator, and homophobic, and an in-the-closet gay. He's obsessed with guys. Apparently only men are deserving of human decency, except if you're gay. Then you endanger his standing in life because he thinks every gay male wants to be with him. Shocker! Open gay guys usually have standards and don't want a grown fat man that can't properly wipe their butt and has an altar boy kink. Side note, if you're interested in someone but don't want to creep them out, offer your phone number. Never ask for theirs. Give them that safety net of keeping their information private. Plus, they don't have to make up an excuse to not give it to you. And just be professional and respectful about it. Hello, my name is your name. I think you're very cute, gorgeous, beautiful, sweet, kind, etc. and would like to get to know you more, if you feel comfortable with that. There's this library cafe, cat cafe, boba tea cafe, Starbucks, etc. with a great friendly atmosphere. If you care to join me sometime, please give me a call or text. Then give them a second to respond. If they don't, just respectfully and kindly walk away. They might not feel comfortable at the time, but how you present yourself, and even more so how you react to the rejection, makes all the difference. Are you a jerk about it? Gonna throw a fit? Storm off? Act like a child that can't get what they want? Saying crap like, well, I didn't want you anyways. Like, grow up. No one owes you their body or their time. It might sound a bit cringe, but you gotta show that extra respect so strangers don't feel uncomfortable. And never ask to go somewhere private. If and when that happens, leave it open to the other person. They should feel comfortable enough to ask, not feel pressured to give more than they're ready for. But yeah, also gotta take note of yourself. Are you big and scary? Small and lanky? Look shaggy? Do you stink? Do you need a shave or a trim? A shower? To brush your teeth? Do you use deodorant? Do you wash your butt cheeks? Do you stop staring too much? Do you talk about yourself so much or your exes? Do you go on and on about your politics or religion and what you expect out of a relationship? Depending on how you represent yourself, you can look scary or creepy or weird. We gotta be mindful and self-aware. I'm gay, but I know I can scare girls smaller and younger than me. So any bros reading this, just make sure you listen to the people you like, be it women or men. There's a lot of very serious and real examples of what not to do posted by women. My heart goes out to them. And a good rule of thumb, treat others how you want to be treated. Don't want some creepy guy egging you on to meet at a hotel room? Don't do the same to women. Just whatever disrespect and discomfort you don't want, make sure you don't hand it out to others. Very well said. Respect, observe, and acknowledge. And giving your phone number out is a good move too. Story 40. I came across a guy on Hinge who had responded to one of my profile questions, saying, "You haven't left your door open for any more homeless people, have you?" LOL. And I was legitimately freaked out. I live alone in a loft-style apartment above a store in the city. I have a door to a stairwell, and then my actual apartment door is at the top of the stairs. I leave the bottom door unlocked when I'm traveling so any packages I ordered can be left inside instead of on the street. What struck me while I wondered how this man knew my door situation was that I got a phone call from a cop in my city over Christmas last year. I was out of town with family and I left that bottom door unlocked. While doing routine business checks over the holidays to make sure no stores have been messed with while they're closed, a cop noticed my door was unlocked and left me a voicemail letting me know he locked it. The man who messaged me on Hinge must have been that cop who found my door unlocked. Creeps me out to this day that he really thought that was the way to start a conversation with me, by basically saying, I know where you live. Story 41. I have known 5 men who said things to me related to being able to essay, assault, or kill me, usually without anyone knowing, and then insisting it was just a dark humor or a joke. Each time I exited the situation as safely and quickly as possible. Some were work colleagues and I had no choice but to be around them at work, but I made sure never to be in any situation where I would be alone with them again. If they weren't a work colleague, I cut off all contact immediately. I also warned female coworkers and friends about my experiences. Not surprisingly, some of them had also had same experiences with the same men. I'm not on this planet for anyone to suggest that they could hurt or kill me. It's not a joke. It's not funny. I see a lot of comments about how it's harmless dark humor. Too bad you don't realize that it's not harmless dark humor to the woman you're with when you say it. To us, it represents a direct threat, and we talk about it with each other a lot. We know you. Story 42. A man decided to sit beside me on the bus, which was empty at the time and had many other seats available. Kept talking to me despite me having headphones in and reading a book. I could see he was trying to talk to me in my peripheral vision, but just pretended I didn't see and kept reading my book. He put his hand on my thigh to get my attention. When I took out my headphones to ask him what he wanted, he said, "I like your jeans." I said, "Thanks," and told him I wanted to go back to reading my book. He sat there for an extra 10 minutes speaking to me while I had my headphones in before he left. I haven't rode on my city's public transit since. Please don't sit beside women on a bus to try and speak to them. I got off at a wrong stop intentionally and waited for the next one just so I could be away from that situation. Story 43. Being backed into a corner. When I was 20, I was working part-time as a waitress at a restaurant where I was, by far, the youngest employee. I had been experiencing harassment, uncomfortable comments with the male kitchen staff at this particular job, more than I was even accustomed to in my experience in the service industry. One morning, I was opening the front of the house alone, accompanied only by 2 cooks who were prepping in the back of the house. At one point, I walked into the kitchen and into the walk-in freezer. While I was in the freezer, the 2 cooks, both large men, 300 plus pounds and in their mid-40s, walked into the freezer with me and shut the door behind them. I turned around and felt nothing but total fear. I backed up into the wall of the freezer, clearly uneasy. Then one of the cooks looked towards the other and made a truly revolting joke about giving me the 2-for-1 special. My heart was racing. I literally shoved past them and ran out of the freezer. I was terrified to go into the kitchen for the rest of my shift and frankly, the rest of the time I worked there. Story 44. So I accidentally freaked out a few of my Uber drivers one time, accidentally, and almost got my butt kicked by them because of it. So I pick up these 2 girls from a club downtown late at night and they ask me to take them home, and they both hop in the back. I make polite conversation at first, just asking them how it's going and all that before letting them have their own conversation in the back while I turn up my lo-fi hip-hop and focus on driving. Well, my GPS effed up and I missed my turn. No biggie, I decided to pull into this next parking lot and go back into the parking lot with no lights that was surrounded by buildings. The women immediately started getting quiet and I could feel the mood shift in the car, and one of them said, I immediately got panicked and said, No, I missed my turn, I swear. And after a moment, they both started laughing and thankfully turned an awkward situation into something funny. Told me they were about to beat me to death with their heels, and I can respect it. Either way, got them to their destination and no one got bludgeoned. Story 45. I'm a dude, but during the pandemic, I drove around a bit in the winter to hit up Pokestops. This wasn't uncommon as a few other cars were taking similar notes, stopping a few minutes in sections of very long parking lots next to a bunch of baseball fields and a church. I was in my car spinning a Pokestop on my phone, and a few cars pulled up on either side of me. There were 3 teens to 20s and part of the Pokemon group and noticed me around and wanted to invite me to join their Discord. But when they pulled up on either side like that, I was ready to run people over to get away. I live in a pretty safe area, and they weren't even in SUVs. But I was spooked enough to stop playing Pokemon altogether, since it made me realize how easily I could be blocked in if they had a third car with them. Long story short, treat parking spaces like urinal stalls and don't roll up next to people like that to get their attention. Story 46. So I was in my college library. A guy comes up and sits next to me. Starts asking which course you're in, which semester, which class, and which subjects. I reply, giving this fake smile and burying my head into the book and thinking, geez, can't you see? Let me study, man. His questions start getting personal. He starts telling me about himself, which I clearly wasn't interested. I take out my phone from the pocket and pretend to be very busy. He goes on, excuse me, you're not listening. You didn't tell me your name. I put my phone back and say, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm busy. I have to finish these pages. He kind of rudely says, then why are you on your phone? I don't say anything. He asks for my Insta. I tell him I don't use it. He says, but you were just on Insta when you were using your phone. It was so uncomfortable. The guy even asked me about this diary of mine, which I had kept on the table. I said, yeah, it's mine, in which I scribble some poems and stuff. And the moment he took it, laughing and saying, oh wow, let me read your poems, without even effing asking me, snatched it right away, stood up, collected all my things from him, and quickly left the library. That night around 1 a.m. I got this message on my Insta, and yes, it was him when I didn't even share my username. Creepy it was. Story 48. When they invade the personal bubble, the security guard in our office did this. He likes opening doors for people, but whenever he opens it for me, he leans his body towards me and I get very uncomfortable. I realized he was harassing me when he stares at me from the reception for the longest time and made advances to touch me. He touched my arm once slowly and I didn't react quickly enough. I was confused, but I feel gross even now. My coworkers had the same experience, but she hadn't been touched. I told female coworkers I was close with about it, but they said I was just mistaken about it and he's just friendly. If these women do not take me seriously, then what more of the male HR who likes listening to our misogynist company president? Even my coworker who said she had the same experience thinks I'm exaggerating. It made me angry, so now I make his life in the office a living nightmare. Just a lot of passive aggression to make him upset. I wish he would lose his cool and then he'll get fired. Story 49. This sounds so innocuous, but I've had it happen enough times that it's almost comical how so many creeps have had this in their repertoire. Hey, where's my hug? Said with a big grin and wide open arms. Every single time this is the very first time I have ever met them. They'll be friends of my friends who I hug like we haven't seen each other in months, so you go to hug your friend. But Mr. Red Flag sees this as an opportunity to touch me, and the handful of times I did it, even though I wasn't comfortable, it just emboldened the guy to continue knocking down boundaries and being incredibly physical, because they see you'd rather let them touch you than feel awkward and say no. I'm older now, and I just laugh and say no and walk away. Like, not angrily or anything, I just act appropriately, that I think it's weird he wants to embrace a stranger, which he is, and he's a creeper. Story 50. Saying we should be scared or should be more careful, especially in whatever the current situation is. Chances are we know and tried to give you a chance anyway, and this instantly makes us regret it. Saying we shouldn't be scared because you're not going to do terrible thing to us. Insisting on a hug, especially if we're small and you're big, whether the difference is height, weight, muscle mass, or all of the above. Not saying anything about yourself on a date, but asking us a bunch of invasive questions. Walls of text when we haven't been talking for long. Jokes about all the women you know being crazy, being female dogs, etc. Getting aggressive with others while around us, even if you turn around and start being sweet to us right after. We still saw you get loud and mad a second ago. Trying to roleplay in the DMs. Yes, even if we said we're into roleplay, talk to us like human beings first. Story 51. The other day, a guy on a bike made my walk home from shopping very uncomfortable, frustrating, and an icky experience. I had headphones in, and I'm sure my demeanor made it pretty clear that I was not looking to make friends or talk to anyone. Initially, I noticed some guy on the bike ride past me, and then very obviously slowed down. His eyes right on me the entire time, even turning his head to look back as he turned to the next corner. I thought it was a bit weird, but just kept walking. When not even 45 seconds later, he's back and riding towards me. He must have just made a loop around the block. And then the entire 4 to 5-ish blocks that I had to walk home, he just rode beside me, staring at me and grinning while I kept my headphones in, briskly walking, looking straight ahead and just pretending he wasn't there. I wasn't going to give him any opportunity to initiate any sort of interaction. As I got closer to my street, obviously not wanting him to know where I lived, I decided I should probably tell him to leave me alone or something. But the second I took my headphones out, before I could even open my mouth, he asked me what I was making for dinner, all smiley and friendly like, as if he wasn't just being a creepy effing weirdo for the past 15 minutes. I didn't even know how to respond to that. I just said, dude, can you please leave me alone now? I don't remember if he even said anything else, but I remember making sure to watch he rode a decent amount away from me before I sped walked back to my apartment, anxiously looking behind me every little while to make sure he wasn't back. So, men, if you fancy a lady walking by herself, either approach her respectfully and introduce yourself, or if it looks like she doesn't want to talk, respect that. Don't follow along a couple feet away from her for 20 minutes waiting till she takes her headphones out so you can talk to her about her dinner plans. Story 52. I went to Florida one summer to see if I wanted to move down there, and I ordered food via Uber Eats. The The guy who came asked so many invasive personal questions. I didn't feel safe, and it was my first day there. He came back the next effing day and gave me his phone number. He yelled through the door and he said he saw my car and just wanted to give me his number. I was so intimidated that I thought, if I'm nice to him and let him invade my home, rented a house for a month, then maybe he'll leave me alone. He came back the next day and knocked again. I saw his white hair through the window. I didn't answer that time. I periodically saw a white car, looked like his, parked down the street from the big window in the house. You could see through the blinds at just the right angle. I ended up sleeping on the couch that whole trip because I was so scared he, or one of the other creeps I met there, or someone else would try to come into the bedroom. I didn't feel safe being alone. I eventually thought I'd be safer if I got a male roommate, even though I hate living with someone. I was wrong. Some men are great men, I just don't happen to be fortunate enough to have met or known very many of them. Story 53. Not understanding that for whatever reason when I say no, I mean no, and they keep pushing, even if it is about non-sexual things. The most recent example was a few days ago when me and my best friend went out with some friends of hers, and because I was the driver and I didn't eat very well, I only drank one small glass of beer and water the rest of the night. There was this guy that for some reason got very excited that I was a female drinking beer, like I was a rare species or something, and I kept insisting that I drink more beer. I kept saying no over and over, and he kept insisting I should drink more. While thinking I was messing with him and being difficult, he thought it was a joke. At some point I yelled at him and he got so offended and said I was overreacting. How many times do I have to say no? If they don't understand that no means no, even for something small like this, how can they understand it when it comes to something more serious? This infuriates and terrifies me at the same time. Story 54. Bit of a long story, but here it goes. My girlfriend and I went to a music fest in Kentucky and copped an Airbnb at this Kentucky mansion, basically a large farmhouse on a ranch, on the drive-in at night, and we both joked saying, "Oh, this is definitely a horror movie location. We might get chopped up staying here." Flash forward 2 days to our last night, and we decided to go out back to the pond for some tree time. The owner of the Airbnb, John, came and sat with us with his best friend, also named John, and started unloading his life story. After about 10 minutes of this, there was a long pause, easily, a straight 30 seconds, followed by his friends just leaning forward and saying, "You think anyone could hear us out here if we screamed?" And when I tell you, mine nor my girlfriend's stone brains were ready for that, I was just terrified. Ended with us basically saying, "Well, we're off to bed," and locking our door and staying awake watching Love Island. Story 55. Randomly showing up at my place without an invite, or saying they're going to drop by when I'm least expecting it. Unacceptable. Or stalking me and my dog while out on walks and trying to force our dogs to interact as a means to start a convo. I've crossed the street multiple times to get away and was still followed. Had to circle the block until I lost him because I didn't want him to see where I lived. Edit. My dog is protective and does a great job of dissuading strangers and or dogs from approaching me. I still bring a taser with me on our walks in case extra persuasion is needed. Story 56. There are many, but for some examples, I'm going to use a workplace superior in another department who I've never been introduced to or had any professional dealings with. Bend forward and squint at my chest, his face only inches away, and for a significant time saying, "What does your shirt say?" Insinuate that he notices an uncomfortable amount of detail about me. "You're not wearing a wrist brace today. Did you get tired of that other hairstyle? You always stand with your weight on your left foot. I never noticed that you had a tattoo." Go too far out of his way to interact with me. He scared the crap out of me one time in a stairwell when I turned around and he was right behind me. I had earbuds in. He had seen me walk past his office and had gotten up and followed me down 3 flights of stairs to get my attention to say something to me. This is what he needed to say. "Are you okay? You haven't seemed like yourself recently." As others have said, touching unnecessarily. There are very few types of touching that are necessary in a workplace. Anything else makes me feel very unsafe, especially from a superior, because I can't necessarily tell him I'm not okay with it without retribution. Thank you for making this thread, by the way. Reading the responses has been so validating. Story 57. I'm a guy, but was driving an old acquaintance and with this girl he just met back to his house. She was very adamant about getting a ride home from me, a stranger, with another guy she barely knew. I initially refused for this reason, but this acquaintance insisted. I've never seen someone so uncomfortable in my life. She is closed off in every way, looking nervous, and my friend is talking to me like she isn't there, saying weird crap like, "This is the girl I'm going to marry." and randomly trying to make out with her in the back seat, along with telling me some other personal crap they talked about privately before I met up with them. I seriously thought that they had known each other when it happened. Otherwise, I would have offered her a ride out of there. Apparently, after I dropped them off, she walked to a bus stop to get a ride home and never saw him again. I stopped talking to this guy after he kept putting me in situations like this. Story 58. There's a lot of good ones here. To add a few, asking when I get out of work instead of when the store closes. Asking a lot of personal history questions. RBF plus eye contact. Sudden outbursts. And a few red flags that frighten us into questioning everything we know about their relationship. Being too pushy and or persuasive. Am I being overridden? Am I being gaslit? Do they care about my opinion or how I feel at all? Always playing the victim. Can't take responsibility, can't see their errors. Lying about where you've been. The mind runs wild with speculation about why. Lying about interests, likes, and dislikes. Were they faking those to find commonality with me? Story 59. My fiance and I drove to the bottle shop on our way home one night, around 9 p.m. The parking lot was full, so he drove around the corner and parked in an empty lot with one lonely lamp, away from any streets or shop fronts. To get back to the bottle shop, he walked us down a shortcut alley. Concrete walls on both sides, no lights, nobody around. When we got to the bottle shop, I told him that I would have never parked somewhere like that or walked down that side alley. I explained how unsafe it was, honestly, even for a big guy like him. I told him I would have parked somewhere close to the store, well lit and public. He stopped and looked at me and said, "None of that ever crossed my mind." That makes sense. More recently, we went to a big Easter fair, and again the main parking lot was packed. He drove to the furthest block and parked on the roof, which was almost empty. As we left, I said, "I would have never even thought to park here." We came back to the car at 11 p.m., climbed the empty stairwell for 3 floors, lift was out, came to an empty rooftop, nobody around, complete darkness, just our little car away in the corner. He said, "Oh, you're right, I get it. I wouldn't want you here alone." Just never even entered his head how unsafe it was. Those situations honestly just made me pause and realize how many choices I make throughout the day to avoid issues, without even consciously thinking of them. I think we could all do better to be cautious, or regardless of how at risk we think we are. I've been stalked 3 times that I know of, and I'm sure that I've avoided more creeps than that by being aware. Story 60. The creepy first date suggestions. Want to come on an overnight trip with me to another city? No, that's unsafe. Let me take you to a pool party. Bring your swimsuit. It's a first date and I don't live in LA or Miami, and even then, no. Come over to my place. I don't know you, we haven't spent 15 minutes together. Refusing to take no for an answer. Multiple times, then wanting to discuss why you feel this way when they still haven't respected your no. It shouldn't be a conversation. I didn't sign up for a whole debate on the negotiations of this. My no and my space are mine. Respect that. Men that catcall on the street. I feel like it's gotten a lot better, but also maybe I'm not a young teen anymore. When I was 13, I'd get creepy guys hanging out their window, honking at me, smiling, smirking. No matter how much I tried to be invisible, to wear a hoodie and sweatpants, these adult men still tried to shoot their shot from their moving vehicle. I had to avoid car main roads, pick off-peak traffic times. Middle of the night was safer than dinner time, honestly, to avoid the catcalls of grown men. Men who go on intellectual rants, but who don't listen to women's opinions or voices. There's the meme of the, "well, actually," person. A dude will argue over technicalities and try to make a microscopic point on something while you're arguing about your equality and just trying to be heard. I've watched a group of 6 men talk about James Bond, get stumped on a trivia question about the movies. The waitress walks over and shares the answer. She's a Bond fan too. And rather than talk with her and include her perspective, they ignored her like they couldn't hear her, like she was a nuisance for speaking to them. That stuff happens a lot, and you instantly lose respect for the guys who don't listen, who can't hear what we say. However, it's frightening because that's stuff some coworkers and bosses will do, or it happens during political discussions. You see, well, actually, and you don't understand this, little lady, so don't worry your little head, ma'am. I learned a one-liner from a radio show, and I'll repeat it as total truth, though I quoted it wrong. I will not listen to you when you fact-checked me. Had a supervisor for 5 years who couldn't hear my ideas. Took 2 other men, the supervisor's supervisor being one of them, to get my ideas heard. Even with 2 votes of approval, they'd get rejected because I had the idea. I don't know why the boss's boss didn't just pitch the ideas himself. I feel that would be more successful. Being a woman and talking to someone who can't hear women is just stressful. Story 61. All right, y'all, story time. So this happened right before COVID. I was waiting at a bus stop near campus. I'm a college student with my earbuds in, listening to some Fall Out Boy for nostalgia. Anyway, I had this bus tracker app on my phone that said the next bus was about 20 minutes away. So I wasn't in a rush or anything. I was just leaning against a sign, nodding my head to the beat of Fall Out Boy, and generally not paying attention to my surroundings. Suddenly, someone touches my shoulder. Not a friendly tap, but a firm squeeze. Something only a good friend would do, and even then they'd give me some notice first. I don't do well with being touched unexpectedly from behind. Elbowed a friend in the jaw once, kicked another friend in the groin by reflex, head-butted one in the nose, the list goes on. So I was pretty sure it wasn't someone I knew, since no friend of mine would take that risk. I whirled so fast my earbuds fell out. Standing behind me was this guy who looked to be at least in his 60s, which, made me glad I hadn't effing decked him. Lesbians get a bad rap already where I live, and laying old men out on the sidewalk probably wouldn't be the best representation of the community. He gave me a big, toothy smile, and I swear he had the ugliest effing teeth I had ever seen. Anyway, I was raised to respect my elders, so I put on my best innocent straight girl look and said, "Hey, can I help you?" His grin widened, which was already effing unnerving, but then he said, "Hey, baby girl, how you doing?" So I take a step back, suddenly wondering if it was too late to lay him out on the pavement, and then noticed another man, slightly younger, coming up behind me. The two men made eye contact and grinned. It was not subtle. Just waiting for my bus," I said in what hoped was a casual and very non-confrontational voice. My hands went to my pockets. I flicked open my switchblade with an audible click, knowing it would probably shred the inside of my new leather jacket, but not caring at the moment. I hoped the click would put them off, but they didn't seem to notice. Still, I didn't want to pull the blade out in public since I was technically not allowed to have it on campus for legal reasons. I did, however, fidget conspicuously with the pepper spray clipped to my belt. They didn't notice that either, or just didn't care. "The bus, huh?" said the second man. "Where are you headed?" "I have to meet up with some friends," I lied quickly. "They're expecting me soon." I was not meeting up with anyone. I was just going to my dorm to take an effing nap. "You got beautiful hair," the first man said, still smiling. "Where you from? India? Them girls do have the prettiest hair. Smells the best, too." He took a steps toward me. My grip tightened on the knife. Still, I didn't want to pull it out. Maybe they're just being friendly, I told myself. Crap, maybe this is normal. Maybe I'm the one being an idiot here. It would be stupid to go to jail for something like this, wouldn't it? It would be so easy, though. I was no stranger to fighting. But it's way easier to justify beating the crap out of a frat boy who touched you and your friend at a party than it is to justify why you had to lay out two old guys at a bus stop. I am Indian," I told the first man, trying to keep my voice friendly. "Not from there, though. American-born and raised." "Yeah? Well, you're gorgeous," said the second man, stepping closer to me, his greasy gray hair swaying as he walked. The men were larger than me, but a solid roundhouse to the kidney would drop one, and a slash at the groin with my blade would drop the other, even if it didn't connect entirely. But I would go to jail if they hadn't done anything to me, so I just stood there. I didn't even know why I was afraid. I was a trained martial artist, and I was armed. These were two old men who clearly thought they were dealing with some ditzy, exotic piece of bud or something. They'd never see it coming. But somehow, I was the one who was afraid. I'm not the victim here, I tried to remind myself. I'm the effing predator. They should be afraid of me. But dang it sure didn't feel that way. Effing hell. I was just standing there waiting for the bus to show up because I was so effing scared of... I don't even know what I was afraid of. I had never really felt like this before. I had been catcalled before, harassed before, but always by people my age, college guys, and I could handle that. I had no qualms about hurting them if necessary, but grown men? Not people 40 years older than me. Not people who could report me to the police and be taken by far more seriously than a drunk frat boy. I felt so helpless and scared, in spite of everything I was capable of. I still feel ashamed sometimes that I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, while those men made increasingly uncomfortable and sexual comments about me. I got angrier and angrier, but I didn't lash out. Not once. I just smiled and nodded and acted like this was totally fine. When the bus showed up, after an eternity, the two men got on right behind me. My stomach effing dropped. I didn't get off that bus. I just sat there, way past my stop, refusing to leave until both men had left. It took almost an hour, and the whole time they were looking at me, whispering and laughing to each other. I was so angry. I was so angry and scared and ashamed. When they finally did get off, I halfway rose out of my seat to follow them before the rational part of my brain kicked in. I couldn't follow two old guys and attack them with a knife. What the F was I thinking? I was so angry, I was shaking. The thing is, I wasn't even angry at them. I was angry at myself for letting them make me feel like this, for letting them make me feel so small and helpless when I knew for a fact that I wasn't. Anyway, I went home and cried. did some pull-ups, cried some more. Never told anybody what happened that day. It's too embarrassing. I'm still ashamed. So yeah, I don't know. Those men came very close to ending their day in an ambulance and myself in a jail cell. Some days I think that would have been better. Ever since that day, I feel like I'm lying to people. I act like this tough lesbian that doesn't take any crap, but that's not true, is it? I did nothing to stick up for myself that day. I'm a fraud. Anyway, that's my crap experience with men who didn't even realize what they were doing. Or maybe they did. They probably did. Oh, that's gross and heartbreaking that this honestly has such a lingering and lasting effect. Like, it's traumatic. Some people, it's unacceptable. I understand the feeling to want to just kind of, go at them. Especially while "Thanks for the memories" is playing in your ear. Story 62. One of my little sister's guy friend had a big brother who kept asking me if I wanted to go out with him multiple times. I always said no, but he kept coming in once in a while over 5 years to ask me the same thing. At first I didn't want to block him because he wasn't mean or disrespectful when talking to me, but then I decided to block him because it was just too much. I thought I was finally left alone when he started making new accounts over and over to see if I changed my mind. I blocked and reported him and haven't heard from him since. Context, he's a famous guy in my city, so I think him being rejected hurt his ego, and he's known for being kind of aggressive. So thank God I never saw him in person for a while. So please, when a girl says no, that means no, guys. She's not going to change her mind later. Just leave it. Story 63. Off topic. Fathers and uncles, take note. A lot of these answers have to do with intimidation. Girls are, on average, smaller and have less muscle mass than guys. But on average, they have more heart, and they're usually quicker. Also, in my experience as an uncle, little girls are more likely to want to actually fight someone way bigger than them. Take that energy and put it into some martial arts. Everyone wants to put their little girl into ballet or softball. Get some of these girls into Aikido or karate. They don't have to become black belts, just like every Boy Scout will not become an Eagle Scout. They'll still learn the basics and self-confidence. Meanwhile, never compliment their appearance unless they've obviously worked for it. Compliment what they do, not what they have when they wake up in the morning. Teach them their worth. They should know their worth to you. You show it every day, but they need to be taught their worth to their community and to the world at large. Compare them to women who mean a lot to you and tell them how and why they're like that woman. It matters. Story 64. It was the first time I, 26-year-old female, met a guy, 31-year-old male, in person from Tinder. We messaged like a couple of months ago. We had lunch together, and after that I had to return to work. That wasn't far, but he offered me a ride, so we had a chance to talk more. I didn't see any red flags so far, so I agreed. The place I was working at was a very popular Big Four with this big logo at the top of the building, so there was no chance he can get lost getting there in the city. Super well known this building is. Everything fine until he suddenly took the return, going to the opposite side of the district. I was nervous telling him that is not the right way. His answer that it's a better idea taking me to meet his mom and say hi before leaving me at work. So I freaked out and jumped out of the car at the first red light and start running to the opposite way a couple of blocks and enter to the subway station. I never gave him the chance of explaining or talk again. Just blocked him on the spot when I felt safe. After that, he tried to contact me with other profiles and phone numbers that I just had to block too. Story 65. Asking for help with something they know you're not knowledgeable in. I've been approached in media market and asked for phone recommendations. I told them, happened 3 times. I don't work here, to which they responded they just want my opinion. I gagged after one of them asked me out for coffee. I am here to shop for headphones, not date. And you always know it's romantic by their tone. The other time it was raining and some guy walks up to me and asks how to activate his new SIM card. I told him to look for his provider's store and go there. Before he could ask me out, also specific tone, dismissive about actually activating the card, not listening to where the stores are located, I just said, it's effing raining, dude, and ran for my tram. On the same line, those who enter the store to talk to you or take your number, then they corner you around the employees, so you feel pressured to give them your number to not seem like a female dog. When you say you have a boyfriend, then they suddenly back off, usually having more respect for a fellow man than a fellow human. All happened in the mall or city center before I turned 20, all with men 30 plus. I was single. My imaginary boyfriend saved me multiple times. I owe him. Story 66. I think in general, women are scared of first few dates when you don't know each other so well. Asking to go to a secluded place like hikes or walks or your house. Solution. Pick a public space like a restaurant or a cafe, picking them up in your car. Solution: take a taxi or Uber. Having one more person present with your data is reassuring. Asking them for your home address. Solution: meet at a public place like train station or a city center. It's also really scary when a bunch of men in a group look my way for more than 5 seconds when I'm alone and start pointing at me or talking about me. I would highly appreciate it if the group looked the other way or went on with whatever they were doing or talking about. Story 67. When I'm alone or end up going a little bit further away from my partner to check out something, I've had it sometimes where out of nowhere these guys would come up to talk to me from behind even though I'm busy. They would start with something creepy like, "Hi, how are you? I'm such and such. What's your name? You live around here?" And would ask really personal questions about my life. Even though I'm clearly not interested and uncomfortable, they still persist. And eventually it leads to something like, "Are you alone? Do you have a boyfriend?" No matter what I tell them, they'll usually have some sort of line like, "Want to trade? I'm a nice guy and I could treat you better than your boyfriend. Maybe I could change your mind," etc. Even this one time I straight up said, "I'm not interested, I'm monogamous, and I've been with my partner for over 12 years, yet his response was, "So? What does that have to do with anything? I could show you a good time, and if you let me, I'll be an even more amazing boyfriend." Like somehow he would change my mind, but unfortunately these situations suck because they seem to get really triggered if you decline them. I wouldn't know, but these seem intentional, especially when they know it's not going their way. They'll throw compliments out to make you feel too embarrassed to say no or something. Either way, it's a frightening thing to experience, and while I don't go alone anymore, especially due to the crime and kidnappings here, if a guy does one of these, I just go straight to my boyfriend and then say, "Did you need something?" as he follows me back and stands there. Seems to work okay so far. Yeah, a lot of these stories are just general predatory behavior. It's not like, oh, this guy's accidentally doing this thing, he's aloof, he's, just not aware or observant. These guys are very purposefully forcing themselves and trying to get something out of a situation that they know is not going well. Story 68. I used to walk a 10-minute journey home from the bar I worked in at 3 a.m. I like to smoke a joint and enjoy the quiet after being in a loud place for hours. One night, a dude suddenly appeared next to me and started to ask where I lived, was I single, etc. I made a vague gesture with my hand and said, "Just down the road, my boyfriend is waiting for me." I was single, and politely asked him to go away. It was at this point he started to ask me pretty aggressively to give him a beej, and I realized that we were completely isolated down a main road with no cars around. It was effing terrifying. I had my keys between my fingers in my pocket the whole time, so I pulled those out. I pulled my phone out and started screaming at him to get the F away from me, and that I was calling the police. He walked off, shouting obscenities at me, and when he was far enough in the distance, I sprinted home. Never walked home from work again after that. Story 69. Yelling when you don't have to yell. For example, screaming at the TV or a sports game. I can totally understand being angry and cussing a little, but I'm talking about full-blown screaming. It makes me so uncomfortable and puts me in fight or flight mode. And this isn't just with dates either. I have a friend who is very extroverted, fun, and a great to be around person, but this dude screams when we're driving just talking about normal things like politics or crappy professors. I haven't gotten around to talking about it with him just yet, so he doesn't know, but it puts me into a complete shutdown. Also, completely unnecessarily cussing and using language for relations in a normal conversation. For example, I used to work at a warehouse. All the time when I would come in for a shift, I would greet the morning shift people who were leaving, and oftentimes they would say, "Yeah, we got assaulted today, so good luck out there." Bro, what the F? You couldn't have picked a better word? Story 70. When I have my headphones on, please don't talk to me. Please don't follow me 3 blocks to get my attention because I know you are following me. I'm turning corners and going into stores and you are still there following me. Also, I hate when dudes take pics of me. I would sit on the subway and they would take pics of my feet. I stopped wearing sandals because of that. I also won't go into your car even if you ask nicely. Yeah, I'm struggling with groceries, but I'll manage. Maybe it's because I'm in a densely populated city, but I'm exhausted. I also get freaked out when guys are persistent with my number after telling them no. I'm taken or I'm gay, and no fakes aren't always the answer because they call you right when you do to give them one sometime. Yes, I do block them, but some of them live in my neighborhood and there's only so many routes you can take to get to the train and not be late. I just want to be left alone. Story 71. So many things. As context, I'm a survivor, DV, DA, SA, so my alarms are always slightly ringing. But even before, a list. Standing too close, especially when I've already asked them to step back. And then I ask again, and they get huffy. Just step back, please. Would you want to feel breath on your neck? Just please step back everywhere. There's no need for you to be standing so close. Quite apart from the C word, I generally end up having to stand side onto them with my weight on one leg and the other out, and I've still ended with men standing with their feet either side of my back foot. Please don't huff and sigh when I'm waiting at the counter to be served. I can't make the people ahead go any faster, and sighing is only going to make me panic, so I end up struggling with my wallet and panic more. I wear the sunflower for a reason. Please don't walk so close behind me. If I'm going too slow, please feel free to go around me, but be aware. When you walk past me, please do it with more than a few inches clearance, and especially don't do it next to an alleyway or something. I'm aware the queue of traffic is annoying. I know, I'm stuck in it too. But trying to fit your bonnet in my boot, honking and wildly gesturing isn't going to make the traffic go any faster. It's going to panic me, and worse, annoy you. So when you finally get a chance to go faster, there's more likely to be an accident, and someone will have caught you on the dash cam, getting aggressive. Please just calm down, take a deep breath, and be patient. Please don't approach us in big groups and wonder why we get defensive. It's unnerving. Very simple. Please be aware that if I do get defensive, it's not just you, it's also knowing that if something happens to us by you or another man, we are very unlikely to get any justice. Even if a case does go to court, unlikely, we'll be painted as scandalous harlots, wearing little and throwing ourselves at every man in the area. We've been shown for years that we will get little to no justice, so I would expect that it's understandable that we're so cautious. Please don't follow us home. Sounds obvious, I know, but you'd be surprised. Final one, from me anyway. Do not send us pictures of your chicken. Just don't. If we don't explicitly say, please send chicken pics, don't send them. What are you hoping to achieve? A flaccid chicken is laughable and an erect one is aggressive. There's only one thing you can do with an erect chicken, and when you send us a picture of one, especially yours, out of nowhere, it gives off a big, gross vibe. Just don't do it. Story 72. I'll never forget this. I worked in a retail gift shop place where it was normal for me to be the only person at the desk. It was a slow day, so the store was basically empty, and since we weren't allowed to be on our phones, I was just dancing to the music. I was like bobbing my head and moving my arms and stuff. Then an older guy came in, I'd say like middle-aged, and I was a teenager in high school who maybe could have passed for being over 18. Visibly young. I guess I didn't hear him come in, but he saw me dancing and laughed and sort of dancing along with me. I laughed too in a kinda, aha, you caught me way, and I thought that would be that. But he approached the desk and said, those are some nice dance moves. I chuckled and said thanks, and he just went on about my dancing. Eventually, he started saying stuff like, do you dance with your boyfriend like that? I was young, but not so young that I didn't know what that line meant. If I told the truth and said, I don't have a boyfriend, he would have taken that as permission to keep hitting on me. If I said that I did, he would ask more personal questions about our dancing. So I lied and said something vaguely to the affirmative. He kept being flirtatious, and I suddenly became aware of how alone I was. The store was dead. There was another girl on the other side of the store, but I had no way of contacting her to come over. The monitors for the security cameras were on my side, so there was no way she could see me. I'll never forget how scared I was when I realized that I was completely alone. Story 73. I used to work third shift at a gas station on an army base, and one night this dude comes in and is milling around periodically, looking at me. He comes through my line, and I'm customer service friendly, making usual small talk. Meanwhile, he's asking questions about me, like where I'm from, what time I get off, if I know good places in the area, etc. He leaves, then comes back 10 minutes later and does it all over again. He did it about 4 to 5 times until all other customers had left and my coworkers were on break or busy in the back. I was dating an MP, military police at the time, and sent him a quick SOS text because dude was really freaking me out. My boyfriend was patrolling a different area and couldn't come right away. So he called for one of his buddies who I was friendly with to come help me out. So the buddy comes into the store a few minutes later and comes straight over to me, loudly calling me babe, hugged me and kissed my cheek. He then proceeded to get a coffee and hang out by my register, BSing with me and calling me babe. Creepy dude finally left and the buddy continued to stay with me for a bit. I asked him why he pretended to be my boyfriend, and he said that if it was just him hanging out as a cop, the guy might have come back later or another night, but if he saw me with a boyfriend, it'd send a way better message to stay away. Dude may have been trying to build up the nerve to ask me out or something, but honestly, it was just unnerving and creepy. I hated that I had to keep smiling and acting friendly each time he came into the dang store and my line. Another time I was out at the club having girls' night, and while we were on the floor, this dude came up dancing up on me. One of my friends pulled me away, I didn't realize he was back there, and instead of taking the hint, he moved so he could get behind me again. We went to a different part of the floor, and he followed. He started getting a bit hostile about what our problem was and telling my girls to stop trying to block him. He tried turning me around to pull me closer to him, so I acted like I had to puke, and we made a quick escape to the bathroom. We explained to some girls who were in there what was going on, and they peeked out to see if he was out there. And he was. One of the girls ended up going to get a bouncer to get the guy out of there and ended up kicking the guy out. We stayed a while longer, but when we left, we made sure one of the bouncers walked us to our car just to be safe. Honestly, there are so many things guys do that come across as scary, and as a mom of 3 girls, it scares the crap out of me that I had to start talking to them at young ages on red flags, guys show, and how to stay safe. Story 74. Nothing really except some strange behavior. For example, working and someone seeing my name tag and calling my job to ask for my number. A guy pulling a gun out on me and telling me to get in his car. I took off running. Another guy cornered me in the bathroom and pulled some stuff out and told me to do it. I didn't feel threatened, I just laughed at it and ran out. For me, it's really overt things. I've not had a man do anything that made me feel threatened that was acting normal behavior. However, my relationships with men and men in my family have always been pleasant, so my experiences weren't enough to completely trigger me against men for minor things. Also, red flags in men are when you work in a bar and they hit on you when their girlfriend goes in the toilets. That's not threatening, but it gives me an eye roll. Story 75. I was recently at a hotel with my husband and had to go down to our car. It was daytime, though I'd gone down at night alone too. I just make sure to always have my phone, whereas my husband isn't that particular about that. Anyway, I was coming back inside from the rear access door that went to the parking lot. This guy walks past me. I assume to the ice machine around the corner, but doubles back almost immediately. I'm at the elevator. He approaches saying he passed it. It was kind of hidden. I'd missed it once, so I thought that made sense. He gets in the elevator and starts talking to me. I can't remember when he asked me now, but I remember being immediately on alert more than I already was. Elevator arrives on the 3rd floor. He never pressed any buttons, so I'm getting ready to speed walk to my room, afraid he'd follow me. My large husband, our large family friend with his wife, and our toddler are in the room, so I'm trying to figure out how I alert the men without endangering the toddler. The guy says, "Oh, I forgot to put in my floor," and doesn't get off the elevator. I booked it to our room. My husband checked the hall after I told them the story. I still don't know if the guy chickened out of nefarious plans because he figured a hotel wasn't the best location, or if he was just an awkward idiot, but I was terrified. ETA. I remember now, he told me the coffee was no good and that it might be better if you added ice to make it iced coffee. It seems innocent, but just the way the interaction went down really had me on alert. It really felt like he only got in the elevator because he saw me getting in the elevator. Story 76. Continuing to compliment me when I tell them I'm not interested or when it's clear I am no longer engaged in conversation. Look, I'm 6'2", I'm a big female dog in general, I rarely feel physically threatened. However, I really hate when guys will compliment me over and over even after telling them I have a boyfriend. I'm not interested. I do the nervous laugh, I try to walk away, I stop responding, etc. It happened mostly when I worked in retail and I couldn't escape or be a female dog because, I could lose my job. I really hate when people hit on you at work because you can't just leave. I'm fine with being hit on, I have no problem with shooting your shot. But there's a time and place. Oh, and also if guys come on super strong in DMs or are violent with their words, I get a lot of the kink people who message me because of how I look. No kink shaming here, and as an alt or goth person, I tend to attract a certain crowd. But it can be scary when I open my messages to a guy saying he wants to do something violent or have something done to him, or worse, wants something done towards me. Not everyone needs to hear all of your inner thoughts. Story 77. It's not quite scary, but it's stressful to try decoding if a man at work is trying to socialize in a regular, we both work here versus a non-platonic way. When I was 24, my team's lead boss, so approximately 3 steps above me at the company, was a man in his 40s who found out that we shared an interest in gaming. At first it seemed harmless. He slacked me to ask what games I was into and told me some recs. Then he asked for my number and said it was because of work. Slack wasn't really intended for social conversation. Slack was new then and he was a VP, so I just followed his lead. Slowly, that became him talking about his marital status and how he wanted a threesome with his wife and her doctor. Soon after, and at a team lunch, he insisted on sitting next to me and wouldn't talk to anyone except me, including his direct reports, who were equally unnerved by his behavior. Eventually, I quit, but it was effing weird and made me nervous about working with men in general, which sucks because most aren't like that at all. But now I'm scared I won't realize the intent or interpretation of the situation isn't platonic quickly enough. Story 78. Wow, naive old me thought there would be things like getting really angry about missing a point in mixed double tennis or something like that in the thread. On behalf of my fellow XY carriers, allow me to apologize. Women of Reddit, there are a bunch of straight up creepers out there. Men of Reddit, please read this thread carefully and don't do this crap. But how will I meet women if I don't randomly approach the hot ones on the bus and then pester them for blocks? Join something, get a hobby, go places where men and women gather together for a purpose that is not hooking up, so no bars or clubs. It can be anything, a book club, a weekly trivia group, church, synagogue, temple, mosque, a makerspace, literally anything where people with a common interest that ideally you share get together semi-regularly and interact. Then just chill the F out and get to know people, the men and the women. The older women and the women your age. Make some platonic friendships. You will click with someone eventually. And then if you want to go hiking, she will have known you for a few months at least. Wait at least a few months before you ask anyone out and won't have to be as worried that you're going to bury her alive. Story 79. Fallen in love, declaring me to be his soulmate when we've just met and I've told him I'm married. It seems like younger guys do this. I've never heard that stuff from anyone over 40. A guy did this to me. I thought I was being responsible by walking to the bar and planning to walk home after. Some kid, early 20s, easily 20 years younger than me, was hammered and decided that I was his soulmate. His words, when the bar closed, I effed out unseen. But then, of course, I was walking down the well-lit street and he found me. He kept trying to get me to go to his apartment with him and I kept saying no. So he finally just picked me up and turned to carry me there. I fought and he let go. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground with a cop over me. And the kid is telling him I'm his girlfriend and I'm just really drunk and we live right over there. He'll take me home. I was very confused. It was hard to think clearly. Cop asked me if I wanted the guy there. I said no and he sent him away. He then proceeded to spend 20 minutes lecturing me on being this drunk. I was having trouble thinking and talking and I couldn't stand up without swaying, and threatening to arrest me and toss me in jail until a judge came in on Monday for public intoxication. I have no idea what changed his mind, but he drove me home without a ticket or anything. It took me way too long to realize that I had an effing concussion from being dropped on the street. The cop never asked if I was okay, if I was hurt, or even what had happened. Story 80. I work in a shop inside a shopping mall. There's a few security guys that wander about and sometimes pop in to chat when they're bored, which is all good. What's not good is when one guy in particular comes in almost every 5 minutes to ask weird questions while I try to work. What's worse is that my colleagues know he likes me and wants to ask me out, because when I'm not there, he told them and asks where I am. Today he came in and wouldn't leave while I tried to serve customers. He is just standing there. I went through the back and left him with a colleague and another guard, and when I came back, they were gone. Then my colleague tells me that the other guard told him to ask me out, saying, "The worst you can say is no," to which he received that can only be described as an incel reply. So now I'm scared that he's going to ask me out, and when I turn him down, he'll go ballistic. So long story short, if a girl isn't flirting back and is obviously uncomfortable, just leave. Don't think that you can change how we feel, especially when we've made it clear it ain't gonna happen. Story 81. You know those guys who seem sweet but make you uncomfortable as heck? I met one of those people at my old school before I had to move. I tried being friends with him because I had one class with him. It seemed like everyone made fun of this guy. Let's call him Jay. He always seemed upset, so when he made a joke, I would try and laugh or something. But after a while, he started to get a little too close. I have a weird yawn where it will start off deep and then end very high-pitched. My dad said once it was like a chipmunk. I joked about it once with Jay, and then he started to joke about it every time I yawned, saying chipmunk while pointing at me and laughing. It made me scared to yawn, and I tried my best to stop. I asked him several times to stop joking about it. Then I had to raise my voice a little and he got all defensive and told me it was just a joke and I was overreacting. Not to mention I hugged him once, one time, and then he would randomly go up to me, hold his arms and ask, "Hug?" I'd always say no because after a while it got very uncomfortable. He'd say stuff like, "You never hug me," or "What's the big deal?" or cross his arms and stick out his lip to pout. Jay was 6 feet tall and very large. I was 5'7" and skinny. I think the reason he made me uncomfortable was because he scared me. He was larger, and I knew if he ever got mad or tried to hurt me, I'd have no chances of fighting back. And Jay couldn't take no for an answer, ever, not to mention his temper. I regret trying to be friends with him because even after I moved, I got a friend request from him on Snapchat. I told him I didn't have Snapchat and I didn't give him my number. And I know none of my friends gave him my number because I told them all how he's made me uncomfortable. So it creeped me out. I also found out that after I moved, he made fun of one of my friends with a perverted joke because my friend's skirt had gone up a little. Jay was very loud, and it took my girlfriend to tell him to shut up for him to stop talking about it. She reported him twice and ended up crying because the school did nothing. It only shows me that he's getting worse. Story 82. So here's the creepiest bicycle story. And I really hope this doesn't even belong here, because I hope he knows he was being creepy. It was when I was 17 years old. I was on my way to babysit 2 toddlers when a man in his 40s just started to ride his bicycle next to me. Firstly, we just had a normal conversation. He just asked about my age, where I was going, where I went to school, and stuff like that. I also asked him things to look interested. Obviously, I was not, because I wanted to be kind. He started to tell me about some massaging classes he took. First, he asked if he could massage me. I said no. He started to tell me about some things that he learned. He said that you have to start at the shoulders, then go down on the back and go all the way from the hips to the feet. And everything he said, he did. So when he said to start at the shoulders, he touched my shoulders. Then he went down to my hips via my spine. He made a short stop at my butt and ended up with touching my upper leg. His hand rested on my leg for a while. He almost touched my private part. Then he started to ask me for directions. I gave them to him, but when we both had to go our separate ways, he asked me to explain it one more time. So I stopped to tell him again. When I was about to leave, he asked if he could kiss me on the lips. Of course I said no, but then he grabbed my arm and he forcefully kissed me. I was disgusted and left as soon as I could. I've never seen him again, luckily. Ugh, all of this is not okay. All right, this is way past the line of any sort of, are they being creepy without realizing it? Okay, so if there are any women listening and you have moments like this and you think, I wonder if he knew, maybe I'm overreacting or something, am I just pretending to be a victim? This kind of stuff is not okay. This is not some sort of misreading social cues. This is just straight up assault. Story 83. I had a first date with someone I matched with. He'd suggested a park since it was nice out, and I thought it sounded cute, and more importantly, public, with other people around. We met up there, and the vibes seemed okay. Then he asked if I wanted to join him on a secluded trail he'd discovered here, because it was more private and we could chat without being bothered. I immediately saw that as a red flag. Probably innocent and well-intentioned, of course, but I majored in criminology, so my thoughts automatically jumped to dark scenarios. I politely said, no thanks, and he suddenly got really loud and did an obnoxious fake laugh before saying, what, you think I'm gonna try and essay you or something? I'm sure he could tell I was very uncomfortable, and he calmly added that he left his duct tape at home, so I was safe with him. Told him I should probably start heading home because holy heck was this the most uncomfortable thing I'd ever experienced. And then he got super passive aggressive and told me to lighten up or I'd always be single. Never did dates at the park again. To be honest, I really hope that dude was just ignorant and has grown up a bit since then. I'd like to believe he genuinely meant no harm and didn't realize just how much we have to consider in order to protect ourselves from the worst possibilities. Story 84. When they stare at you even after you tell them if they could not. This is directed at one of my old classmates. He sat beside me and he kept staring at me. I made eye contact and said, what? So many times, but he always replied with, nothing, and looked away for a couple of seconds just to look at me again. One time I told him that I don't feel comfortable when he stares at me and that it's sending the wrong message. He said, oh, okay, and I thought it would be over. Next day, he didn't stop. Honestly, regardless of gender, if you do this and it's clear that the other person doesn't like it, just don't stare at them any chance you get. Another thing is when they stand too close to you. I'm using the same classmate as an example. Every chance he got, he would stand close to me, but so close that our shoulders would be touching. He would randomly stand too close behind me without saying anything, and when I turned around, he just says, hi, and walks back to his seat. Another time is when we had this lineup for something and he chose the spot, although it was a very crowded in my area, right next to me. And whenever he played volleyball and his spot was behind mine, he would be sure to always go right behind me whenever the ball would come my way. But this dude would barely leave any room between us. Like I could feel his presence behind me, and I just prayed that he would stop one day. Please never do these things. Story 85. When men have too much to drink on trains and they think they're being friendly towards people. In my country, people taking the train are allowed to purchase alcohol past a certain time on a Friday afternoon. One evening when I was on the train from college to home, a man had way too much to drink and was, in my mind, having the time of his life and was playing loud music and talking, or shouting, I don't know which, to people on the train. At that point, my internal alarm went off, and I was frantically texting my dad to pick me up at the station ASAP, as I didn't feel safe at all. I would also text my boyfriend and one of the best friends at the time, letting them know of the situation. Drunk man got off the train at my station and was haggling people for money. I put on my resting female dog face and he didn't go near me. My dad wasn't there at the station. He was feeding the dogs at the time. I asked a group of women if they could stay with me until my dad picked me up, and at one point the drunk man tried to get at us. The oldest woman, who was an angel, told him to F off and leave us alone and to go take a hike. The group of women stayed there with me until my dad picked me up and he hadn't had a clue what was going on. I told him what happened and his face dropped and apologized for being so late. Since then, if my dad or my mom hear a text like that from me again, they call me and stay on the phone with me until I'm with a group of people or until they pick me up from my location. I did text my best friend and boyfriend that I did make it home safe. Story 86. I started taking ceramics in high school during my sophomore year. Small class, 7 girls, 1 boy. I've always been pretty quiet, so I just kept to myself the whole period with my headphones in. The one boy came up to me one day and asked my name, and I got pretty flustered and told him. He introduced himself and said he was taking photography as well. He then asked if he could take a picture for me, told me his assignment was to take a photo of a school friend. I've never spoken to him before and was obviously put off by his request, but I didn't want to make him feel awkward by saying no. He took a picture of me with his phone. It didn't click to me until later, but he actually told my ceramics teacher about how he was only allowed to do assignments with his class-assigned camera. A few weeks went by without him speaking to me, and he decided to come back over to my table. He asked to take another picture of me, and I agreed, assuming it was for his photography class. He would begin to hover over me without speaking while I do my work. This went on until the end of the school year. Nearing the last days of school, he told me he was going to art school and said he'd love to use the photos of me as future assignments. He asked for my number, and I stupidly gave it to him because, again, I didn't want to hurt his feelings. Time had passed, and it was a few months into summer vacation, and I had totally forgot about him. I got a notification from that iMessage folder that's called unknown contacts or something like that. I assumed it was probably spam, but I checked it anyways. I realized who it was, though he never gave me his number. It was full of messages like, "Good night, send me a selfie, why aren't you responding?" Stuff like that. 2 months of messages ignored. The messages eventually stopped. I wonder if he realized how weird he sounded. Story 87. I had a super deluxe creep try to hit on me in a true crime channel comment board on YouTube. At first I thought maybe he followed the same sites I do and recognized my profile name. So after he posted to me, "Hello," I asked him if he knows me and he said no, but just wanted to say hi. I said, "Oh, okay, then hi," and he said that he was an engineer in the oil industry. I guess I was supposed to be impressed. Before I could respond, he asked what I do. At this point, I can see he's trying to hit on me in a weird and creepy, lonely way, so I was up to play a game. I told him I was an astronaut. He responds with, "I'm an American, working out of the UK. Again, I think I'm supposed to be impressed. He asks me where I live. I say Liechtenstein. He says he loves to travel all over the world. He asks me what my hobbies are. I say I like to go to Thailand, buy a bunch of coke and hash and feed it to the street monkeys and watch them assault and rob tourists. He then says he'd like to take this to a private chat where we don't have to watch what we say. I tell him, F no, you hit on me in a true crime channel, creepy factor number 1. Ask me questions about myself but don't care enough to read my responses because they were purposely outraged in creep factor number 2. Then ask to go to a private chat and expect me not to believe that you're going to start talking F kinky crap and send chicken pics and ask for nudes? No freaking way, creep factor number 4. He didn't respond and I saw him playing his hello game to another woman on the same channel. Story 88. I was working for a big, recognizable brand hotel resort in Palm Springs, California, in the business center, and our counter was very visible in the middle of the hotel lobby. Had a director for some small-rated commercials ask me to be stand-in for some prepaid phone cards. Right before cell phones became mainstream, I agreed to do it, and met him and the film crew on set at the local mall where I filmed a scene at the bank of exterior payphones. Director said I was really a natural and wanted to use me to shoot a scene for a landline use of the card, but didn't know if I should be used in more than one scene story. I have naturally curly ringlets, so I told him I can straighten my hair and look like a totally different person. So I was in an indoor scene using one of the hotel rooms to film with, and apparently the only local celebrity they could afford, Trini Lopez. After we shot all the scenes, I was invited to go to lunch with the cast and crew. So I did. It was kind of a wrap party and cool to hang out and get to know everyone. Later that night, I was home and the director called and asked me to have dinner at the hotel in his room so he could get to know me and talk about other acting opportunities he could get for me. He was quite a bit older and my first thought was, oh, so this is the low-budget D-list casting couch. I had no interest in dating my way into future work, so politely told him I was home with my young daughter and didn't have anyone that could watch her for me. He offered to pay for a sitter, and by the way, I could order whatever I wanted from the room service menu. I again politely declined, so he gave me his hotel room number just in case I changed my mind. He was nice enough, but it just felt creepy to be asked to dinner in his room and know there had to be strings or expectations that I'd find myself in an uncomfortable situation. It could have been perfectly innocent, but the odds were not in his favor. Story 89. A supervisor trying to pass on some of yet undisclosed information. Guy was not my supervisor, but I was trying to transfer to his team and he was telling me someone else was being moved to the team instead of me. Seemingly innocent information until you add the fact that he'd pulled me into a small 10 by 10 room, just the two of us, where I had to back on the door and he put his hand over my head to hold the door shut, despite the fact that it locked to the outside when closed. This one is kind of a twofer because the reason I wasn't moved is because my manager had been lying to me and had not actually told the other managers of my interest, and I was moved almost immediately after they found out he'd been demoted for various issues. This supervisor recently disclosed to me that he finds me attractive, and the only reason he hasn't tried anything is because of my husband. Then there's the time I was hanging out with a guy friend. He went to drop me off at home at the end of the day, only once. He went to turn onto my street. He swerved away from it, proceeding to circle my house 3 to 4 times, joking about how he should just take me back to his place, and how he didn't want to stop hanging out. He eventually let me out, and I ran into my house. And to think I felt obligated to maintain that friendship for a while longer.